Welcome to Salcedo Paranormal. It is Thursday, February 17th, 2022. And tonight I will be talking about the novel It by Stephen King. As always, to find all episodes of the podcast, as well as links to social media, ways to donate, and other ways to contact me, you can find all those at my podcast page, which is salcedoparanormal.podbean.com. And that's SALSIDO paranormal.podbean.com. And always looking to hear from you all, whether you have comments or questions or topic suggestions for episodes, or if you have any stories of paranormal experiences, either of your own or others you trust. Always happy to hear from you. And you can either send those stories to me in the text format, or you can join me on the live streams on Discord if you are able, and I have you on the show. So that takes care of that. Like I said, always happy to hear from you all. Thank you all for listening, whether it's to the live streams or to the podcast or to the YouTube videos. So, as I said, today I'll be talking about the novel It by Stephen King and just connections to the paranormal in different ways. And just a couple of things I do want to mention first. There will probably be spoilers. And I will not get to cover, and I would not try to cover everything in that story because it is over 1,000 pages long, I believe. So this will just be a summary of the basic plot and just some memories of the story as I remember reading it years ago. A couple of times I've listened to it now, and then I read it once in high school. So there's a lot of stuff that I won't get to. So I definitely recommend reading the book. It's definitely only for, I would say it's probably best for adults, just because of some things that you will find if you read the book or if you've read the book. You'll know. But just in terms of why I'm sharing these books on this show, it is an interesting one to consider. This is also somewhat inspired by a show I listened to earlier this week on Trouble Minds Radio, which talked about this idea of the kind of the universe being a giant web of energy in a way. And it just made me think of it, really, and the way it kind of has connections to that. So I guess I will get into the summary now, and we'll go from there. I'll have a description of this book here, and that's what I'll be using. So again, this is about the book, not so much the movies, or any of the movies. Just because I didn't really I saw bits and pieces of the one from, I believe it was either the 80s or the 90s, and I haven't seen any of the more recent 2 films that were made about it. So this is all just about the book. Excuse me. Also, I'm going to talk about this in 2 sections to start with. One is about events that happened in the story in 1957 to 1958. And then the next section will be about the events that happened to some of the same characters from 1984 to 1985. But the book does a really amazing job at going back and forth between these 2 times. as events are unfolding in each time. And I can't imagine trying to summarize the book in that kind of a format, because this is just a summary, and so I'm just going to take this in chronological order, at least to start with, and then maybe we'll bounce around here and there after. So in 1957, this book starts out, takes place in a town called Derry, Maine, in the state of Maine. And this Derry is a town that comes up a lot in Stephen King's novels over the years. Derry and then Castle Rock are two of the main towns where a lot of King's stories take place. And just in case you hear anything in the background, that would be my heater, because I live in Michigan, so can't really avoid that. So anyway, this book starts out with a boy running down the street. His name is George Denborough. It's basically, there's been a flood leading up to this event, this story. But it's the waters have come down somewhat, but there's still a lot of water. And he takes this paper sailboat, or basically a paper boat, out to the streets, which are still mainly flooded, as far as the roads anyway. And he puts it in the water, and then he chases it through town. And then eventually, though, it goes into a storm drain. And then George looks down into this drain and sees a clown who introduces himself as Pennywise, the dancing clown. And this clown has George's boat in his hand. And he acts kind of nice and friendly, but there's this weird air about him, because what would a clown be doing? And even how would a clown be down there under the streets when everything is flooded? But eventually it leads to this clown killing this boy. So later on that year, there is, and the story switches to another boy named Ben Hanscom. He's 11 years old, and he's being kind of bullied by this other kid, older kid, I believe, named Henry Bowers, and some of Henry's friends on the last day of school. And Ben escapes into this marsh area known as the Barrens, and he finds a couple other kids there, including Eddie Kasbrack and Bill, or he's as he's known at the time, Stuttering Bill Denborough. Now, Bill Denborough is the older brother to George. So at this point, I'm sure he's still really upset over his brother's death. And over time, they meet more other kids around their same age. Richie Tozier, Stanley Uris, and then Beverly Marsh. And they kind of nickname themselves the Losers Club, because they've all they're like some of the most unpopular, some of the unpopular kids in school, and just similar events around them. So they become friends throughout the summer, and each of them throughout the summer, though, they meet Pennywise in a different form. They don't really realize it yet. um, Basically, he's seen as a mummy on a frozen canal by Ben. Beverly Marsh sees basically this strange fountain of blood that comes out of her bathroom, her parents' apartment, the bathroom sink in there. A rotting leper to Eddie. Drowned corpses to Stan. And a frightening kind of doppelganger of George to Bill. So, at the same time, Henry Bauer is starts to focus on neighbors of his, including the neighbor's son, Mike Hamlin. Bowers ends up killing the family's dog and chases Mike into the barrens, where Mike joins the rest of these other characters, these other kids, in the barren, which is that marsh area, and he basically does. All these other kids see that he's being chased, and so they start throwing rocks at Bowers and other kids that kind of have been following Bowers. So there's this huge rock fight. It's really, it's not like in a way, it's really kind of rough because these kids are all throwing rocks at each other, and you know they all do get hit at one time or another with a rock. And it turns out Mike has seen this Pennywise in the shape of a flesh-eating bird, giant bird. Excuse me. And then basically Mike also shows the group this historical scrapbook of it's basically about Derry, and they all kind of realized that what they were all seeing was the same kind of thing, and it's an ancient monster that has been in the town for a long time. Basically, it comes back every 27 or 28 years and is around for a year, and it takes different forms and or the clown form to kill kids, teenagers on down. And so that's basically what they figure out that it is and what it's doing. So, and that's really interesting in a way that, because you hear that in other stories about basically through mythology of different beings kind of coming and going, appearing and then fading away, or even waking up and going to sleep every so often, different periods of time. And also, I don't remember if this was a common thing before or if it was just these two events in the story, but both in 1957 and 58 and in 1984 and 85, and as all this is going on, each of those 2 years, there is this massive flood in Derry. And so that's a really interesting thing. I don't remember if there was always floods every 27, 28 years. But I didn't see anything in the article about that, but I wouldn't be surprised. Again, that goes back to the power of, and the energy created by moving water. So that's really interesting. So anyway, let me find my place again here. and also get something to drink here. But yeah, so thank you all for being here and listening to this. Hopefully it's you enjoy it. Um, like I said, I've listened to the book a couple of times, and even though it is rough in places, it really is an interesting book, and I definitely recommend it to anyone that is into horror. So, but anyway, so let's get back to this here. So yeah, so basically, after this rock fight, Henry Bowers, basically says that he'll have revenge on the group of kids. Excuse me. So, not long after that, Eddie, who is asthmatic, is hospitalized by Bowers and several of his friends. And then, but then Beverly sees one of the bullies kidnapped by it in the form of a mass of flying leeches. So it is doesn't really care who the kids are. Basically, is what it comes down to. But then, see, I forgot about this part. Basically, Beverly and the rest of the group, the Losers Club, find a message from it, and it's written in Patrick's blood, warning them that it will kill them if they interfere. Yeah, I do remember that part now, actually, a little bit. And so one of the Ben has this idea based on different stories in fiction and I guess stories that he's read. He used to read a lot, actually. I remember that. He has this idea, and he's heard of silver could possibly hurt this thing. Could maybe hurt it. And so he takes a silver dollar, and he has two basically slugs that can be used like in a slingshot. Basically the group goes to this abandoned house where Eddie and Bill and Richie had all seen it in different forms. So they go to this house to try to find it, to kill it. And eventually, while they're in this house, it appears to them in the form of a werewolf. Kind of like from a movie, because it even has like clothes and everything on it. And so they use these slugs on it, and it hurts it, but doesn't kill it. So from there, it escapes, and it manipulates Bowers into killing his father, and then chasing the Losers Club, the kids, into the sewers to kill them. And of course, Bowers has his friends with him, but along the way, it actually kills Bowers' friends. So that Bowers is the last one left. Henry Bowers gets lost in the sewers and is traumatized after that. So eventually all the kids find it in the sewers. And there's this really weird, and doesn't describe in this article, and I don't remember enough in detail, but Bill and it lock eyes with each other, and Bill is kind of goes into a daze, and he does this kind of out of body astral travel kind of thing. And goes to face it in something called the Macroverse, which is the alternate universe where it came from. So, and there's another being there that is basically the opposite of it. It is basically everything evil, and but this other being is just all good. And this turtle, it's basically a giant turtle, which again goes back to mythology. Turtle is used in different legends. I forgot to look that up. I didn't think about that. But Bill learns from this turtle. It's named Matron in the story. That the only way to kill it is to basically fight it in a battle of wills, like through the person's will, or their I guess their spiritual energy and force. And so Bill sees its true form, which are called the deadlights, which are just these strange lights, almost like eyes that are just out there in this universe. So Bill defeats this monster in that universe, but he doesn't know, even though that he escapes and everyone escapes. He doesn't know if he's actually killed it or not. And so, but eventually they make their way out of the sewers, and they swear a blood oath to return to Derry, if it ever does show up again. And meanwhile, Henry Bowers basically lost his sanity by the time he got out of the sewers. Had to be put in an institution, and he was blamed for all the child murders that had been happening. Which, of course, it was not him. It was it. So that's basically the events from 1957, 1958. And so that ends that section. There's a lot more details, like I said, in there. But that's basically how those events go. And I will get to the next section here. We'll go from there. So, at that point, 28 years pass. All the kids grow up. And they all leave, all except for Mike. All the kids except for Mike leave Derry. And they basically forget a lot about all those crazy events that happened to them in that city or that town after that. And that is until 1984 things start happening. Kids start being murdered again in Derry. So it starts with the events in 1984. So 3 teenagers brutally attack a young man and throw him off a bridge. Now, one of the bullies and this man's boyfriend see a clown appear in the water and in the basically beneath this bridge. And when the murder victim is found, his body's been mutilated, and the teenagers are arrested and charged with his murder. Even though they claim, a couple of them claim to have seen the clown be there, and that they say that he's the one that actually killed this man. So, and again, more and more, so kids start to vanish and then turn up murdered. And at this point, Mike Hanlon, who is the town librarian at this point, calls up the other members of the Losers Club and reminds them of the promise they made as kids to return if the killing started again. So at this point, they've all moved on and become successful in their own ways. Bill is successful. I said that twice anyway. Horror novelist, living with his wife, who is an actress. Beverly is a fashion designer, married to an abusive man who basically manages her career. Eddie runs a limousine rental company. Richie Tozier is a disc jockey. Ben Hanscom is a architect, and Stan Uris is an accountant. So before these calls, all of them had completely forgotten each other and the events of their childhood there in Derry. And all of them agree to come back except for Stan, who is so frightened that, and he basically kills himself in the story rather than to face it again. So that's just a note. Keep in mind this is a horror novel. Meanwhile, Henry Bowers escapes from the mental asylum, basically because of, and helped by it, who's been kind of torturing him while he's been there. Eventually, this is where we kind of get into the heavy summarization of all of this, but eventually, let's see here. Oh, okay, I skipped a little paragraph here. Sorry about that. So everybody except for Stan meets for lunch in Derry. Mike reminds them about the 27 or 28 year cycle, and the group decides to kill it once and for all. They all break up after that to start exploring Derry to bring back their memories of the past, of the things that happened there before. And they all have experiences with it, who appears in different forms, basically to terrify them more and to basically warn them off again. Meanwhile, the only one that doesn't have anything happen to him at that time is Bill. He somehow finds his bicycle that he had as a kid and brings it to Mike's. Now, meanwhile, Bill's wife, Audra, becomes worried about Bill because of this call and then this unexpected trip that he takes to Derry. And so she decides to come after him. Tom, who is Beverly's husband, arrives there as well. Because when Beverly left, she and him got in a fight, and he basically had to escape, or she had to escape from him. And so he travels to Derry to take revenge and to kill her. And And then Henry Bowers escapes from the mental asylum. Um, Now, so after all this happens, Henry goes to the library, tries to kill Mike, but Mike is able to escape even though he's badly hurt. Um, so it tells Henry to kill the rest of the group, but Henry is killed when attacking Eddie. Doesn't say, and I don't remember how that happened. So then it appears to Tom, Beverly's husband, and basically forces him. See, it is really good at messing with minds, and so it basically manipulates Tom to find and capture Audra, and has Tom bring Audra to the sewers again, where it's living, and so it takes Audra captive, and she basically goes into a catatonic state and shock. And in return for bringing Audra there, Tom drops dead in shock. So this is where the past and the present really start to kind of mix together. And in the book, this is also, again, like I mentioned, the book does really well with going back and forth between the past and the present in the book, anyway, back and forth. So, and that's when everybody realizes that they're being forced into another fight with it. So Mike is in the hospital, and so the rest of them, which is Bill, Ben, Beverly, Richie, and Eddie, they go into the sewers. Now, this is interesting. At some point while they're in the sewers, they start to feel that something is wrong with Mike, or with something to do with Mike, and they focus on sending their energy or their strength to Mike, who, as it turns out, is being attacked, about to be attacked by a nurse at the hospital who is under its control. Mike is able to fight the nurse off, and then basically he's okay after that. The rest of them, the group that are in the sewers, they reach its lair and find that it has taken on the form, at least in their dimension, as a giant spider. So Bill and Richie both go into that same kind of staring contest, battle of wills with it, and they get lost in its mind. Meanwhile, Eddie sprays this giant spider with is asthma medicine, but the thing is, at this point, they're all starting to manifest this energy and this power between them being together, and so it's almost more of a kind of a magical psychic attack, more than even just, obviously the stuff in the medicine and the inhaler. Of course, it manages to kill Eddie at this point, and then it runs away. But then Bill, Richie, and Ben chase after it and find that it has actually laid eggs, which is really interesting because it makes you wonder, did it really, I mean, were there actually its children in those eggs? Never really goes into it, and Ben stays behind to destroy all the eggs, while Bill and Richie head after it, and eventually they kill it. Um, and then the group meets up to head out of the lair, and they they basically have to they find Audra there, and they try to take Audra and Eddie, but they end up having to leave Eddie's body behind. Um, they also notice that the scars on their hands from the blood oath, the blood pact, have disappeared, indicating that they're that's basically over. And all this while, there is a storm, again, 27 years after the last one, that causes a flood and destroys more of the city. And basically everybody that's in the sewers barely manages to escape and meet up with Mike again. Mike, after hearing all this, thinks that that Derry is finally dying, which is interesting because it still goes on in the novels, in King's novels, so it doesn't really die. I don't know how accurate that ends up being or what, but that's an interesting idea that without it there, that maybe Derry won't be the same, which of course it won't because it won't be there to kill so many people, which is good. So it's hard to say with that one. So eventually everybody heads back home, except for Mike, who's already there, and Bill, who stays at Mike's house with Audra. And eventually, even after all this, she is still in a catatonic state, but eventually she comes out of it. And everybody starts to leave Derry, including Mike. He starts thinking of moving out of the town. And at the end of all this, Ben and Beverly end up leaving together and become a couple. And basically everyone goes back to normal lives. And it's basically a happy of an ending as you can expect from all of that. Of course, it's still, there's still been a lot that's happened. A lot of characters have been either changed or died. So, but it really is a lot more interesting than just all of that, all of what I just said. So I would definitely recommend reading the book. There's just a lot of kind of talk about the power of that can come from people getting together, and there's also this idea that just as there are good bad forces out there, possibly things like it, there may also be positive ones out there that help here and there from time to time. So it's it's an interesting book, like I said. But it's a long one, so definitely it'll take you a while to get through. So I believe that covers as much as I can cover in a single episode. But I hope that made some sense. And that's gonna basically do it for today. Tomorrow I'll be talking more about haunted sports venues, and probably what'll be the conclusion of the haunted music and sports venues episodes, just because after tomorrow I'll be ready to stop and move on to something else. I'm thinking next Friday of talking about Beetlejuice, the movie, because when I did that episode a little while back about my favorite fiction, in movies and TV. It's just I'm so used to thinking of Beetlejuice as my favorite of all time that I didn't even mention it in that episode. So I think that's what I'm going to do next Friday is talk about the movie Beetlejuice and go from there. So and then after that, I'll get back to from there. I'm thinking of looking into the strange paranormal stuff that seems to happen around mountains. So I'll be focusing on different mountains and mountain ranges in the U.S. For future Friday episodes. Also, again, like I said, tomorrow night I will be appearing on Shift Happens Radio on the Fringe FM, 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 Pacific, to talk about the paranormal, probably my experiences, and then we'll see where the conversation goes from there. So, looking forward to that. And I think that'll do it. Thank you all for listening. And I appreciate it. Have a good night, and I'll talk to you all in the next episode of Salcedo Paranormal. Take care.